everybody, to a Thursday night edition of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody is having a great day. I hope you're not Mitch Barnhart, because right now that man's approval rating is not very good. I'll be honest, we were not planning on going live today, but when you have like 9 different things happen in the Kentucky coaching search, forgive me, we are going to be talking about it all. So everybody come on in, appreciate everybody's support. And right now, this is what the show is about today. We are going to start with the Kentucky coaching search. Scott Drew said no. Dan Hurley said no. Now the question, do you wait for Billy Donovan? Do you wait and see if he is available? Oh, by the way, what about Mark Pope of all people? What is going on? Chaos in the streets in Lexington. They're ready to shut down the program. So we'll discuss the latest at Kentucky. And then we will also discuss, by the way, as well, some very interesting recruiting news as John Calipari at Arkansas appears to be on the verge of getting his first major commitment. It may happen during the show. It may not happen. But if you know, you know. Hashtag Chicken Man. You know what I'm talking about. Before we get started, a couple quick things here. First of all, before we get started, we got to go ahead and shout out the winners of our Bracket Fanatics Challenge. First of all, we've been working with Bracket Fanatics for the last 4 years. They are the presenting sponsor of our Aaron Torres Pod Bracket Challenge. And with this bad boy complete, want to go ahead and shout out the 3 winners of the Bracket Fanatics Challenge. First off, want to give a quick shout out to Game Day Metrics. He is our overall winner. He had 127 total points. He obviously had UConn over Purdue in the title game. $600 will be coming to you, Game Day Metrics. DF1311BC. Don't know if that's one of those Twitter bots that is always offering nudes to everybody. Either way, neither here nor there. DF, congrats to you. You, of course, are finishing in second place, $250. Also had Purdue UConn, with UConn winning it. Preston in third place had UConn and Purdue. Should mention, just by the luck of the draw, I did finish in the top 10 simply because I did have UConn Purdue. But Game Day Metrics, DF1311BC, and Preston, we appreciate your support. And by the way, we appreciate the support of the Bracket Fanatics and Bracket Fanatics Challenge. Again, 4th straight year that we have been working with Bracket Fanatics, 4th straight year that they have been our bracket sponsor, and we appreciate everything that they have done for us. So with that said, the chat is humming. We got 160 people already in here. We're 2 minutes in and 500 plus on Twitter watching. So with that said, there is no more time to waste. Let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, I think you already know. It is 7 p.m. Eastern time here on Thursday. Kentucky fans, do you know where your head basketball coach is? I don't think so, because as of right now, there is not one, as it was a busy Listen, this is essentially the 3rd time I've gone live today here on a Thursday. This was supposed to be a day off for me, but no rest for the weary, no rest for anybody, but it was an absolutely chaotic day, okay? So it was interesting because coming into the day, we did talk about this on last night's show. It felt like this past 24 hours leading up to right now was a crucial moment in time for Kentucky with Scott Drew. Listen, you can like Scott Drew, you can not like Scott Drew, you can think he's the guy, you can think he's not the guy. But at the end of the day, with Scott Drew, it did feel like you basically had until the end of the day today to seal this guy up. I'll be honest, I didn't want to say it on last night's show, but when you didn't get the commitment from him on Wednesday, and he was going to sleep on it into Thursday, that was where I started to get worried. Because you sit there and say, listen, when you have a life-changing decision, the longer you think about it, the longer you have time to get insight from more people. Your family's thinking about it. Scott Drew's got a wife. He's got kids. 2 of them are in high school. And the more, and listen, I'm not saying he should take the Kentucky job. I'm just saying the longer it goes on and on, the less likely you are to take the job. And so I was a little bit worried last night that Scott Drew was not going to take the job. And then you wake up and you find out today that he is going to stay at Baylor. Just a couple quick thoughts before we get to Dan Hurley and now what the heck is going to happen next. From the Scott Drew perspective, listen, I think it's fascinating. I think it's interesting. And I ultimately think it's the right choice for Scott Drew. Listen, one thing I will say, for years, he has been linked to this Kentucky job. And Mitch Barnhart, we're getting to you in a minute, buddy, because you got a lot of splaining to do. And I'm not sure Mitch Barnhart is going to have a job after all of this is said and done. But at the same time, with Mitch Barnhart, the bottom line is pretty straightforward, is that for years, Scott Drew has been linked to the Kentucky head coaching job, and it's been presumed that he was going to get the job when it became available. But as I said on the Wednesday night show, I said, look, listen, it's one thing to think it's going to happen, but this all happened fast, right? I mean, think about the fact that, let's just say John Calipari had come back next year at Kentucky and it did not work out well. He's, 19-12 and he's a 9 seed. And probably in mid-February that he's ultimately going to get fired at the end of the year. You have time to prep. You have time to think. You have time to react. You have time to plan. You have time to mentally brace yourself that, hey, in a month, I might have to make this decision. For Scott Drew, I don't think he expected it to go quite like this, where you're the Baylor coach. You're happy. You turned down Louisville about a month ago. You think at least for 2024, 2025, that you are going to be the Kentucky head coach. And so when this all happens, seemingly out of nowhere, and you got to make a decision like 24 to 48 hours later, you're sitting there saying damn, I was not ready to do that. I thought I was going to be here for 2024, 2025. This job comes open, and now all of a sudden you got to scramble and make a life-changing decision. And so I'm not surprised. I'll be blunt. I never thought he was the perfect fit. And so now I think it becomes fascinating as to what Kentucky does next. It's especially fascinating, by the way, because of what happened later on in the afternoon. Let me tell you this. It did not take long for Dan Hurley to say no. And so let's talk about the Dan Hurley side of things as well. Now, listen. I've tried to brace you, Kentucky fans. I tried to tell you. I said, listen, I don't think Dan Hurley is a candidate for this job, okay? He's coming off back-to-back national championships. He was one of the 6 or 7 highest-paid head coaches in basketball. And I think he's genuinely happy at UConn. No different, by the way, than Nate Oates. I've talked about Nate Oates many times. I've said, listen, I know it sounds crazy, but Nate Oates is a former high school coach that was probably making 50 or 60K a decade ago. So when he's clearing $5 million a year at Alabama, he's just grateful for the opportunity. Now, I don't know if Dan Hurley is exactly like that, but listen, he tried to tell you guys many, many, many times that he wasn't coming. Listen, I didn't realize because he blocked me, but Kyle Tucker was the one at the Final Four that asked him about Kentucky. And Dan Hurley responded on Monday night, I'm not going anywhere. I think he said something to the effect of, my wife would leave me. I just started making money. I can't get a divorce right now. And so the Kentucky fans, listen, I tried to tell you. I kept hearing, well, he's never officially said no. Yes, he has, 7 times. I tried to tell you. And then on top of that, I thought it was interesting, as we mentioned last night, like people were playing me the Colin Cowherd clip. Colin's great. Colin asked him point blank, are you pursuing other opportunities? He says no. And people were saying he still hasn't said no. Well, Colin didn't ask him if he was taking the Kentucky job. He said, are you pursuing other opportunities? And he said no. And so when I looked at Dan Hurley, it never made sense for a number of different reasons. One, he's happy with where he is. He has UConn at the absolute apex of college basketball. I heard people try to argue, well, listen, it's great to do it at UConn, but if he comes to Kentucky, you're not going to solidify anything. You've just won 2 national championships. You don't have to go somewhere else to prove yourself. And let me also say this, a couple other things. One, I didn't there's just some common sense things with Dan Hurley that never made sense to me. First off, if you paid attention to the things he said at the Final Four, he was happy to be there, but you know what he kept complaining about? He's like, the longer we keep playing, the less I have to go into this stupid portal. It doesn't seem like he's excited to go recruit and, recruit against collectives and have to come up with money and this and that. And so I just bring it up because you're going to leave a program where you've won back-to-back national championships, where the culture's established, and go replace an entire roster? I never saw it. It never made sense. By the way, the timing from Kentucky's perspective couldn't be much worse. There's a UConn national championship parade in Hartford on Saturday. Never really felt like Dan Hurley was going to get up to the podium, thank the fans, and then sneak out the side door in Joe Kraft's jet to go to Kentucky. But let me also say this, and this is where I think Mitch Barnhart screwed up. I can't blame Mitch Barnhart for throwing that Godfather offer out there, or at least on paper, according to Matt Jones, that offer was there. But at the same time, let me also say this. I don't know that if you want Dan Hurley, forget the money for a second. Dan Hurley is as competitive a person as we have ever seen in college basketball, at least, in the modern era, okay? I don't know that the way to woo Dan Hurley is to go ahead and publicly make him your second choice, to publicly let him know that, hey, you're good, but we wanted that other guy first. We got a great tweet in from RG, who's an Arkansas fan. He said, Dan Hurley might go three-peat just because he wasn't happy he wasn't Kentucky's first option, and somehow all his dudes at UConn will buy into it. That's basically the Dan Hurley mantra right there. He will use there it is right there. There's the tweet on the screen. Thank you, producer Matt. Dan Hurley's going to use that as motivation that he was the number 2 choice at Kentucky. So listen, we tried to tell you. Listen, I still think Kentucky's a great job, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But I don't think that this whole thing was handled well by Mitch Barnhart. Let's talk about Mitch Barnhart for a second before we get to Mark Pope, before we get to Billy Donovan, etc. This falls on Mitch Barnhart. And this goes back to something I said the Saturday after the Oakland game, okay? So the Saturday after the Oakland game was when we first thought that there was a possibility that John Calipari could be let go as the Kentucky head coach. I don't think it ever really got that far. I've said it a million times. I don't think Mitch Barnhart was ready to raise $33 million to buy him out. But what I said that day was pretty straightforward. I said, even if you want to get rid of Cal, that's your prerogative. I'm just not sold that Mitch Barnhart is going to have the gravitas to get the kind of coach that you want. And that is exactly where I think we are at this particular moment. Listen, I think Mitch Barnhart, there's a couple things that stand out to me. He screwed this pooch up, 2 ways to Sunday. I think I mixed my metaphors there, but whatever, you get the point, okay? Bottom line is this, is that in my opinion, this is my personal opinion. First of all, Matt Jones has been consistent. The top 3 from day one. I can't speak to the Kentucky side of things. I can speak to the Dan Hurley side of things, a couple other things. But from the Kentucky side of things, the top 3 was Scott Drew, Dan Hurley, Billy Donovan. That doesn't even make sense. And what is very obvious to me is that Mitch Barnhart wanted to play it safe, wanted to get Scott Drew, and frankly, a lot like Louisville, I don't think he really had a backup plan when Scott Drew said no. Now, listen, Louisville, I think it was a little different. I think Louisville, Scott Drew was the pie-in-the-sky hire, and then I think Louisville thought they were going to get Dusty May, and they didn't really consider any other option beyond him. I think Kentucky had their version of this. I think Mitch always has wanted Scott Drew. It's always been public, and I don't think he really thought the possibility existed that Scott Drew was not going to accept this job. And so when Scott Drew says no, you can't then scramble to try and hire the head coach of the 2-time defending champion. If you're going to make that call, you got to make it right away. First thing, no excuses, no doubt about it. You have to let Dan Hurley know that he is the only one in your orbit. You got to be standing outside his window at night with a boombox, letting him know that there is nobody else that you care about like Dan Hurley. I don't think Dan Hurley would have taken it. And here's the bottom line. By the way, quick little UConn note here. First off, from the Dan Hurley perspective, we tried to tell you for days. But 2, I'll also add this. I was told, how about this? That he told his representatives, don't even take calls. I am not interested in going anywhere. We did a little midday update on Thursday, where we talked about Scott Drew and Dan Hurley. And I was told, he told his reps, don't even take calls. Don't present me anything. And so that's what I said at the time. Is that at the end of the day, like, it's great that the Godfather offer has been put together, whatever it was. I think it was, 8 years, $100 million was the report. Well, guess what? If it never makes it to the person that you want to give it to, you could offer him $200 million. You could offer him $500 million. If it never gets to him because he says, I'm not entertaining offers, it doesn't matter. And so it was weird from the beginning. If Dan Hurley was on your radar, you should have probably prioritized him. But I think Mitch, again, screwed the pooch and he messed up and he put Scott Drew first, thinking that he would never have to get to Dan Hurley. And now he's scrambling. By the way, one last little UConn note here. UConn fans, this is a great sign. I think, by the way, Baylor fans too. I don't know how many Baylor fans we have in the chat right now, but I think you have to assume that Scott Drew is going to retire at Baylor at this point. He's like in his mid-50s. You turn down Kentucky and Louisville in the same offseason, you ain't going anywhere. And I think Dan Hurley at this point, I've been told he is going to sign a massive extension. I think the buyout at that point will pretty much preclude him from ever really being a candidate for a college job again. I've heard a number. I don't want to speculate, but I think it's going to be really, really, really high. I think it's basically going to be impossible to get him out of that contract if you are a college program. Now, maybe an NBA program can put together the money that it's going to take. But I think if you're a UConn fan, you got to sleep pretty good at night. I don't think he's going anywhere for a while. So with that said, let's switch gears. Let's go ahead and talk about what's next. Because now we are officially in scramble mode if you're Kentucky. And as I said, as we talked about on last night's show, I said, the interesting thing isn't if Scott Drew says yes. That's not where it gets interesting. The interesting thing is what happens if Scott Drew says no. Because if Scott Drew says no, then it officially becomes scramble mode. And now you're really trying to figure out, okay, what are my realistic options and what are not? And so to me, the first interesting thing is that Billy Donovan still appears to be on the list, okay? And so with Billy Donovan, listen, we've talked about it with the Chicago Bulls many times. The Chicago Bulls have a couple games left. I believe Billy Donovan may have been asked about the job at some point on Thursday. I have not seen the quotes, but I just bring it up because Billy Donovan and the Bulls have 2 games left. Their regular season ends on Sunday, and they probably will be in the play-in. So I think realistically by early this week, the Chicago Bulls season could be and likely will be over. And so I'll be blunt. I do think Billy Donovan is a candidate for this job. I don't want to undersell the fact that I do think that Billy Donovan is still a candidate for this job. But I do think if you're Mitch Barnhart, you need to get a verbal agreement that, hey, this thing is going to happen. This thing is going to happen when the Chicago Bulls season ends. You cannot wait another week, another 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, 9 days, and hope that Billy Donovan says yes. You absolutely have to know. That is important. That matters. Now, from the Billy Donovan perspective, I'll be honest. I've always thought it's more realistic than a lot of other people. Let me explain why. I keep seeing people say, like smart people, why would he leave the NBA for college basketball? It makes no sense. Well, first of all, let's think this out. Billy Donovan's probably going to get fired, okay? like Billy Donovan. Now, remember, Billy Donovan, let's look this up real quick because I did it last night, but I think it's worth reiterating here. He left for the NBA, Billy Donovan, in the 2015-16 season, okay? So he left in the summer of 2015. So he's been in the NBA for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, okay? He made it to the Western Conference Finals in year 1. That was when he had a guy named Kevin Durant alongside Russell Westbrook. And since then, he has not gotten out of the playoffs in any year so far. He hasn't gotten out of the first round of the playoffs in any year since 2015, 2016. This is now year 4 with the Chicago Bulls, okay? Never finished better than 46-36 in a regular season. Lost in the first round in 22. 23, he probably isn't going to make the playoffs. And so if you're Billy Donovan, here are your options. You can stay with, first of all, You can stay with the Bulls, maybe get fired this offseason, which I think is definitely impossible. You can stay with the Chicago Bulls in a no-win situation next year because there is no fix for the Chicago Bulls. Or you could take the Kentucky job. Now, I don't think Billy Donovan, listen, I think sometimes in life, stuff just works out for you. And I think if Cal had left for Arkansas on March 14th, then Billy Donovan's probably not a candidate. But if you're Mitch Barnhart, you only got to wait another 3, 4, 5 days. But again, you need that verbal commitment. And if you're Billy Donovan, you got to really think about it. Because again, you're probably getting fired this year. You might survive this year to next year. But guess what? Even if you survive this year to next year, you're getting fired after next year. And here's the kicker. There's not going to be a job of Kentucky's caliber open next year, barring something truly shocking. And also on top of that, it's probably not going to open in the middle of April. And so the options to me actually make a lot more sense for Billy Donovan. Now people say, well, he hasn't recruited in this era. Guess what? That's what a collective is for. Mitch Barnhart, by the way, if you read the Calipari interview with Kyle Tucker, Mitch Barnhart's got to get that collective together because Calipari said he was negotiating his own NIL deals, which shouldn't be happening anywhere. I think it was actually illegal until like a month ago. But anyway, that's what the collective is for. The collective is supposed to figure all that stuff out. And so if you're Billy Donovan, recruiting has actually never been easier. You identify the players you want, you talk to the collective, you figure out a number, and you get it done or you don't get it done. And so I think recruiting's actually been easier. I don't know. I just think it makes a lot more sense than people are giving it credit for. I don't understand why it's like such a crazy idea that he would come back to college. I've seen a lot of people say that. And the last thing is he's 58 years old. You get fired. What do you want to do? Sit on a couch for the rest of your life? Calipari's 65. He wanted to keep coaching when Kentucky didn't want him. I don't think Billy Donovan wants out. I think this is one of the few jobs that makes sense. And in my opinion, I think you have to be full speed ahead if you're Billy Donovan. Really quickly, I do think that on top of Billy Donovan, the other interesting note that came out of today, and I'm not going to do what you all think I'm going to do, which is crap on the idea of bringing Mark Pope to Kentucky as the head coach. Now, listen, I don't think Mark Pope should be the first choice. I think you should wait out Billy Donovan. Bluntly, I think you should go after Bruce Pearl. I think you should go after Chris Beard. We'll talk about them in a minute. But it appears as though there's a possibility that Mark Pope is being pursued by Kentucky. He is the BYU coach. For people who do not know, he played 3 years, I believe, at Kentucky, at least 2, maybe 3. But he was part of the 96 championship team. And I'll be honest, I don't hate the hire, okay? If this is where it comes to, I don't hate Mark Pope as the hire. As a matter of fact, I said in the 2020 season when he had a top 15 team at BYU, I said, I think he might be the next head coach of Kentucky. The problem is it never really has clicked at BYU after that first 2019-2020 season. Since then, made the tournament, lost in round 1 in 2021, 2022, he missed the tournament, 2023, he missed the tournament. 2024, I thought he had one of the best coaching jobs in college basketball this year, getting BYU to the NCAA tournament this season. People say, oh, he's not that good. Well, first of all, he's had 20-plus win seasons in each of the last 7 seasons at Utah Valley and BYU, including 23 wins this year in the Big 12, beat Kansas at Kansas. And there's a couple things. One, I think he's recruited about as well as you can at BYU, given the circumstances. I don't think it's an easy place to recruit to. I know it's not an easy place to recruit to. I think you give him the resources of Kentucky, I think he'll be a pretty good recruiter. I think he knows how to put a roster together. I think he knows how to use the portal. But I also think, listen, there's not a ton of track record there. And I think in theory, Mark Pope, who's a little bit older than I think a lot of people realize, he's 51 years old right now. But I think the hope would have been that maybe he was the guy after the guy, right? So Scott Drew comes in for the next 5 to 7 years, wins a national title, retires at 60, and then Mark Pope comes in after. But that's clearly not what's going to happen. So with Mark Pope, I'll be honest, I don't really hate the hire. I do, and it, by the way, for anyone joining us, it is not done. So when I say the hire, if he was the hire, but I do, I guess, worry about the optics of it all. If he wasn't a Kentucky alum, I don't think he'd be a candidate. That's not a good sign. You shouldn't be just going after guys because they have loose ties to your school. Also, on top of that, if he's your very public 5th, 6th choice, if it was a panic hire, will Kentucky fans get behind it? I hope they would, because he is one of their own. And so I think it'd be interesting. The one variable, by the way, and I cannot confirm this, so I'm just going off message board rumors like everybody else. Remember who Mark Pope's college teammate was? It was a guy named Jeff Shepard. You may have heard of him. If you haven't heard of him, you have probably heard of his son, who, of course, was a superstar, the best freshman in college basketball this year for Kentucky. And so the rumor going around, I am just talking about a rumor. I am not saying I can confirm this. I'm not saying it's true. What I am saying is there is a belief that if Mark Pope becomes the head coach at Kentucky, that Reed Sheppard will return for another year of college basketball. I cannot confirm that, but I'll tell you what. On the one hand, you should never make a hire for one player. But at the same time, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world either. Remember, by the way, why'd you hire John Calipari? In part because you knew he was going to bring John Wall, because you knew he was going to bring DeMarcus Cousins, because you knew he was going to bring Eric Bledsoe. If you can keep a sophomore Reed Sheppard by hiring Mark Pope, I don't freaking hate it. Forgive me. If that makes me ignorant and dumb, it makes me ignorant and dumb. Give him a 4-year deal. Let him prove it beyond post-Reed Sheppard. But at the same time, I'll just be honest, I don't hate that possibility. Couple other names that I know why. Bruce Pearl and Chris Beard, okay? And what I'll say is this, and we've said this from before the job opened. Mitch Barnhart is not a guy that likes to Mitch Barnhart is not a guy who likes to be super aggressive in coaching hires, but more importantly, he doesn't like taking chances on guys with baggage. Remember, this is his 3rd basketball coaching hire. This is Mitch Barnhart, the AD at UConn, or the AD at Kentucky I'm talking about right now, okay? First hire was Billy Gillespie. John Calipari wanted the job, and it's famous. Mitch Barnhart would not call him back, said, "You have issues with the NCAA, I'm staying out." 2009, the boosters basically said, "This is out of your hands. Calipari's the guy we're going to get." They tried to get Billy Donovan. It didn't work. Tom Izzo went to the Final Four that year. And it was like, this is the guy we're getting. Suck it up, Buttercup, okay? And so with Mitch Barnhart, his stubbornness on guys with baggage, it's like, dude, this is 2024. It's the NIL era. Figure it out and deal with it. And when I look at the available people, I think Bruce Pearl is great. I know he's a little bit old. I know he's in his 60s. But this dude has won at freaking Auburn. No disrespect, producer Matt, an Auburn alum. But give me a freaking break. This guy went to a Final Four at Auburn. He's 100 games above 500 at Auburn. He has been to a Final Four. The following year, by the way, they were 25-6. They finished tied for 2nd this year at Auburn. If you can do that at Auburn, you can win anywhere. And here's the other thing about Bruce Pearl, which we've talked about a ton, is the fact that with Bruce Pearl, at the end of the day, remember, what is the variable with Bruce Pearl? He gets the job. He's a forward-facing guy. He loves being out there. He loves being in the media, and he understands the responsibilities that come with this gig. I don't think he'd be afraid to fill John Calipari's shoes. I don't think he'd be afraid to be the face of maybe the entire state of Kentucky. He's won everywhere he went. Tennessee took him to a place they had never been before, the Elite Eight. Or I think they had never been there before, but he took him to the Elite Eight. Auburn took them where they'd never been before, the Final Four. So you go on and on. This guy is a beast. I don't get why the phone call is being made. And while I can't say that I don't get why the phone call is being made for Chris Beard, I think it's a mistake. Listen, I get that. That Chris Beard, I know why he was fired at Texas, okay? I understand it. I read all the reports. I also know that somebody else has hired him. and somebody else will hire him at Ole Miss, out of Ole Miss. Arkansas almost did it. I don't think Louisville really considered it, but somebody is going to. And the one thing about Chris Beard, and this is important, I keep saying it, Chris Beard in the national title era, or in the NIL era, has built a national title contender. People forget that 2 seasons ago, not 2023, 2024, but 2022, 2023, when he got fired at Texas, they were number 1 in the country that season. He got Texas to number 1 in the NIL portal era. He had McDonald's All-Americans on that roster. He killed the transfer portal with Dylan Dissou and Marcus Carr and Timmy Allen, and he put together a championship caliber roster. That Texas team, by the way, was in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four, had a lead at halftime, fell apart late. So he has built a Final Four national title contender in the portal era. I don't get why this is so difficult. I mean, I do, but I disagree. Your job is to win basketball games. I know it won't be the best look, but the charges were dropped against Chris Beard. And by the way, for people that are going to say this in the mentions, I have no relationship with Chris Beard. It does not benefit me at all for Chris Beard to get the job, okay? I don't get any free gear or a trip to Lexington or a sit-down exclusive with him. I don't get any of that. I just want Kentucky to be relevant. I just want Kentucky to be the best version it can be because it's good for college basketball. I know that Arkansas is about to be the best version of itself here in just a moment. And so to me, we'll see what happens. I'm fascinated by the Billy Donovan portion of things because in my opinion, when I look at the Billy Donovan side of things, I truly do believe that it's a situation where they are, where I think you can wait them out at this point. If Calipari left Kentucky if Calipari left Kentucky on March 11th, you can't wait till the end of the NBA season to hire Billy Donovan. But the end of the NBA regular season is 3 days from now. The play-in will be over. He's got to win 2 double elimination or single elimination games just to get into the main bracket of the NBA playoffs. I think his season is going to be over within a week from tomorrow, a week from Friday. You can wait for Billy Donovan at that point. I don't know if you can wait for Billy Donovan going forward. I'll tell you what, this is what we're going to do. We are going to take a quick break. I do want to come back. Producer Matt, do me a favor. I got to go get some water. Let's run the BetUS ad as a shout out to our friends at BetUS. We'll take a quick break. I do want to take your questions, and then we will talk Coach Cal, who I think is ready to make his first big move as the Arkansas head coach. Quick break. Be right back.
America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Producer Matt, you want to find a couple Kentucky questions before we get into the big pig invasion that's about to be coming to Fayetteville with all these recruits, the Chicken Man? All right, super chat from Pressure Washing with Sterling. Listen, Sterling is right. He says you don't have to wait on Billy Donovan to get the process started. Most can be done over the phone via Skype. Give me the commitment. What he says is give me the commitment right now. Listen, if you're Billy Donovan, your back's against the wall. You got nothing left. It's over. You're not going to be an NBA head coach. It's not for you. You had your moment with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. You missed the window, and you've been holding on for dear life since. I get that the lifestyle is better. I would argue the lifestyle isn't that bad in college right now that we're starting to figure out this collective space and deal. So Pressure Washing with Sterling, I appreciate you. Appreciate your support. Appreciate the super chat. I think it's a great point by you. And we can do more questions at the end too. Go get Todd at Florida. Todd Golden. Listen, Sean says go get Todd Golden at Florida. I don't hate it. I think he's got to be behind. I think he should be behind Mark Pope. I do. I think he should be behind Chris Beard. I think he should be behind Bruce Pearl. But I've actually been impressed with Todd Golden. I know they lost in the first round of the tournament this year, but that is a guy that came to Florida with a plan. Got the collective money together, got the NIL money together. They've been very aggressive in the portal. And I actually like the style of play too. Kind of had those two bigs. He had the stretch five, and he had Tyrese Samuel at the forward. He's got the guards that can shoot. He's got the point guard. I think Todd Golden is a rising star. The good thing is he's he's a baby. He's, I think, my age, younger than me, whatever. I think he's 30, whatever, 35, 36. And I think the good thing for him is that's a guy that, you can go get somebody. If it doesn't work out in 4 years, you can get a better feel for if he's the guy or not. But we'll see on that, Todd Golden. For the producer, you think Tommy Lloyd is worth a shot going after? That's from Ian. Great question. I got to touch base with my Arizona people. Tommy Lloyd just signed an extension. I don't know what his buyout is. Now, what I would say, Kentucky told us, we heard the reports that the buyout would not be an issue with Nate Oates at $18 million. They would pay it if they believed he's the right guy. I think the big thing with Tommy Lloyd, you got to question is a couple things. One, he's a very withdrawn personality. He doesn't do a lot of media outside of the mandatory stuff. Does he know what he'd be getting into being the Kentucky head coach? But the other thing is he just doesn't have the track record in the NCAA tournament. 1 seed in 2022, 2 seed last year, 2 seed this year. 2 Sweet 16s, never been beyond that. And obviously in all 3 years lost to a higher seeded team. So I like Tommy Lloyd. I think he's a rising star. I think it's a tough sell to bring in a guy that has struggled in the NCAA tournament with clearly superior teams. But the one thing I will say, I think he's an elite recruiter. And I also think from the Tommy Lloyd perspective, they sure do play a fun style of basketball, don't they? Couple other ones. For the producer from Casey, how would Kentucky roster look if Billy Donovan can't get a roster together because he comes in late? Good thing is the portal's just getting going. I mean, listen, I'll tell you this, Casey, great question. Always appreciate your support. For Casey's question, he basically says, and this has been a thing with Kentucky fans and Billy Donovan, is he's the one coach that won't really bring players with him, right? If Todd Golden got the job, if Chris Beard got the job, if Bruce Pearl got the job, if Mark Pope even got the job, you can bring 2, 3, 4 players with you that you think you can play at the SEC level. Billy Donovan doesn't really have those ties. I don't think it's as big of a deal, not at this moment in time, because the portal really is just getting going. I mean, outside of Kansas, like Kansas has taken 2 commitments. Pretty much everybody else, like not everybody else is really making moves as of yet. We still have players entering the portal. Jonas Adu from Tennessee entered today. And so I just bring it up because you look at the situation with Kentucky. I still think there's time to put together a roster, even if you're waiting until next week. Now, if you're Billy Donovan, I would hope that if you know you're going to take the job, you have a couple assistant coaches in place that you know are coming with you that are maybe working the phone saying, hey, Coach D, Billy Donovan cannot recruit right now. Just want you to know. If he loses on Tuesday, there will be a press conference on Wednesday, and we want you there with us. So I think that's an important thing, is if Billy Donovan is the guy, again, I'd hope and assume that he's putting together a staff. Maybe one more, and then I do want to get to some recruiting news. Got 1K in here. That's darn right, John. So if you're listening on YouTube on Friday morning, we have 1,100 people live in the YouTube chat right now. We're close to 1,200, plus another 2,800 watching on Twitter. So by the way, if you're not subscribed to this channel, listen, man, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody else. Everybody else comes back to the Final Four, kicks their feet up, has a margarita. Torres may kick his feet up and have a margarita, but he's also doing shows every freaking day. I'm not going to lie. I told producer Matt today, I was like, I'm done. Can't do it. Got nothing left in the tank. I'm like Dan Hurley laying on the floor after the national championship. We were up until 2 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday. We were up until 1 a.m. Eastern time, or we were up until 2 a.m. Eastern on Sunday, 1 a.m. Eastern on Monday. And guess what? We were back Wednesday, back Thursday. And damn it, Kentucky makes a hire. We'll be back tomorrow too. So I appreciate everybody's support. John, as he said, we have over 1,000 people in the live chat. I am so grateful for all of you. I'm so appreciative of everything you guys have done for me. Really quickly, by the way, leave your Kentucky questions. We will get back to some of the Kentucky commentary in a minute. But I do want to switch gears. And I do, very quickly, want to talk another piece of news. Give me one sec. I want to create some excitement. Let's go here. I'm still here. Don't worry. I'm still here. All right. Should have had this ready before. I apologize. Terrible, 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 terrible. Let's go ahead and do this. And let's go ahead and talk. All right. Let's go ahead right now and talk. All right. All right. Let's go ahead and talk the Arkansas side of things. So we just spent a bunch of time talking about John Calipari's former school. But it is worth noting that he has been on the job at Kentucky for 24 hours now, as we are live at literally the 24-hour mark of his press conference on Wednesday night. It is now Thursday, and the dead period in recruiting is now officially over. Okay, so really quick, I don't want to nerd out too much on, I don't want to nerd out too much on inside college basketball, but there was a recruiting dead period right now in college hoops through the Final Four, essentially because of the fact that that basically coaches want to go to the Final Four. They want to be able to enjoy time with their family, catch up with friends without having to worry about, hey, this kid wants to come to campus, whatever. But the dead period ended on Thursday. And I believe we are on the verge of getting our first big commitment of the John Calipari era in a player that we have talked about quite a bit, okay? So on Sunday night, when John Calipari officially, the report came out, Wes Moore, that John Calipari was going to be the next head coach, we went through the entire recruiting class, and I said there was one player above everybody else that I believed was going to ultimately follow John Calipari to Arkansas. Now, I didn't believe this was the only one, but the name was Kevin Knox, 6'6" wing. And as I've told you a couple times, the background seems to indicate that he is a guy that will follow John Calipari. The question becomes, why is that? Well, the answer is pretty simple, okay? It is because, one, his brother Kevin Knox played for John Calipari, Kentucky. The family has a relationship with him. He just committed to Kentucky about a month ago. So if he was seriously considering other schools, you would think they would have been on the list previously. But his Final Four was Kentucky, Louisville. He's from Tampa, so the University of South Florida, and G League Ignite. Well, G League Ignite has since folded. Louisville has since fired its head coach. And so really there was no option other than Kentucky a few weeks ago. And he was the first player to decommit from Kentucky when John Calipari took the Arkansas job. And so because of it, I believe that we are on the verge of seeing Kevin Knox, a McDonald's All-American, depending on what recruiting service you look at, top 10, top 12, top 15 prospect. I believe we are on the verge of seeing him commit. Now, as of 7:45 Eastern, 6:45 Central, it has not happened, but I'll tell you this. Producer Matt, pop that tweet up, baby. Pop that tweet up. Did you see Carter Knox? So you can't see my face, and that's okay, because what you need to do is look at Carter Knox Instagram. Why is that? It is because at about, I want to say it was probably about 4 p.m. Eastern, I got a tip. I was told, Torres, go look at Carter Knox's Instagram account. Did you see what is in Carter Knox's Twitter account? It says Chicken Man with a chicken emoji. And this is, of course, just days after John Calipari took the Arkansas job with the help of the Chicken Man himself, John Tyson. Okay? So maybe it means nothing. Producer Matt, thank you for that. You can take that down. Maybe it means absolutely nothing. Maybe he's just hungry. Maybe there was a comment. Maybe there was an accidental comma that was supposed to be there. Maybe he's hungry and he's just saying, chicken, man. I need some chicken, man. But there was no comma, and it can only lead me to say one thing. I believe that Carter Knox, who was committed to Kentucky, a McDonald's All-American at the University of, in high school, but set to commit to Kentucky, did commit to Kentucky, then he decommits. I believe he is set to commit to Arkansas, okay? Listen, it makes too much sense. All the schools that were recruiting him in the end are out. He has a relationship for many years with Calipari and a couple other things. One, first of all, shout out to John Tyson, okay? Because if that means what I think it means, then what that's really saying is a couple things. One, John Tyson got Calipari to Arkansas, but part of how he got Calipari to Arkansas was by promising him every resource imaginable. And it sure seems like the chicken man is ready to put his money where his mouth is and make sure that Carter Knox is taken care of. And so what I will say, again, it's about 6:45 Central Time as I'm talking here live on YouTube. And what I would say is, as of right now, nothing is official. But I believe something will happen in the next 24 hours, maybe 48 hours. And I believe Carter Knox will be the first player to commit to the John Calipari era. We'll talk about him as a player in a second. But something stands out about this process, okay? One thing about John Calipari, Kentucky fans can attest to it. Arkansas fans, you're going to learn. Everything he does is totally thought out. Everything he does, there's a plan and a this and a that. And you know, no player just commits when they feel like committing. There's always a story behind a story behind a story, and we're going to line something up. And my understanding is that John Calipari has basically had this commitment in his back pocket. And I think the plan was to do it 24 hours after the opening press conference. Now, I'm curious because clearly his former boss, who he does not like, Mitch Barnhart, is flailing in the wind. He's clearly enjoying every second of it as Mitch Barnhart is striking out left and right. And so I wonder if he's waiting because he likes to see his former boss flail in the wind, or if there is a reason that this has not happened. But I believe Carter Knox is coming. The chicken man thing, maybe it means nothing, but I don't think it does. And I think he's going to be your first commit. Arkansas fans, if that happens, when that happens, we'll talk about him. Carter Knox is a really good player. 6'6", super athletic. Listen, I don't, his brother was a great shooter at the college level. I don't think he's as good of a shooter, but I think he is an elite scorer. And the one thing that I keep coming back to with John Calipari, and I keep saying it, and I'm sorry for being repetitive. Everybody's complaining about the one and dones and the freshmen, and you can't win in this era. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. He did it this year. Now, he didn't win the ultimate prize, and the NCAA tournament was no doubt disappointing. I'm not going to sit here and, because he's a coach somewhere else, pretend that the Oakland thing didn't happen. It did. But remember, it was on the back of elite freshmen that John Calipari finished second in the SEC. In the best SEC that ever there was, according to everybody who watches this stuff. Remember, Alabama made the Final Four. Kentucky destroyed them with a team full of freshmen. Tennessee made the Elite Eight. Kentucky beat them in Knoxville. And so to me, the freshman stuff works. And I think if that's where he's comfortable, that's fine. Now, you need to bring in older players. And I'll say this, starting to hear some rumblings that maybe a player or two from Kentucky will follow him. Kentucky fans, I hate to say it, I think you got to get ready for the fact that 2 or 3 guys that you saw in royal blue will be wearing that hog red next year. Now, in terms of the rest of the recruiting class, what I'll tell you is a couple things. One, I'm starting to hear rumblings that Boogie Fland, the 5-star guard who was committed to Kentucky, very well may possibly be following John Calipari to Arkansas as well. I'll be blunt. When John Calipari took the job, Boogie Fland was one that I wasn't sure of. He's a New York City kid. He was going to Kentucky, and I said, is Arkansas the right spot for him? But I talked to some AAU people, the Northeast schools that recruited him. He's from New York City. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that St. John's thought they could get involved, and I don't think St. John's feels like they really have a shot right now. Some of the other Northeast schools that thought they had a shot don't feel like they have a shot right now. And if they don't feel like they have a shot, it's probably because of the fact that that they feel like Boogie Fland is going to Arkansas. One thing to note, Orlando Antigua is the elite New York City recruiter out of who was with John Calipari at Kentucky. Tried to confirm that he is going with John Calipari to Arkansas. I have not. If that becomes official, if that relationship with Orlando Antigua is there, I think it makes it more likely. So we will see what happens with that. But Boogie Fland was a guy that I did not think was going with John Calipari to Arkansas. I think he might be now. That's 2 McDonald's All-Americans. The third one, Jaden Quaintance, as we discussed on the Wednesday stream, has asked out of his letter of intent. Yeah, I think he's following John Calipari to Arkansas. Number 1 center in America. He's 16 years old, which means that he still has 2 years of let me put it this way. He's 16 years old. He is not draft eligible for 3 more NBA drafts. So he's not eligible this year, obviously. He's not eligible next year, meaning he's going to have to play 2 years of college basketball. And so we haven't seen any updates with him, but I get the sense that he is going to follow John Calipari to Kentucky. I'll also add Samto Cyril, who decommitted last night on Wednesday night. I think there's a good chance that he follows. He's kind of that Oscar Tshiebwe mold. So I'll be very curious to see what happens there. The final guy, listen, Travis Perry, the Kentucky State Player of the Year. I think he's staying at Kentucky no matter what. But Billy Richmond, we talked about him as well. From Memphis, his dad played for John Calipari at Memphis, was going to go to Kentucky. But if you can go to Arkansas, which is right across the river from Memphis, I think it's hard to say no to that as well. So I think there's a possibility that 5 of the 6 recruits follow John Calipari to Arkansas. That would be unbelievable. Shout out to the Chicken Man. All right, let's take some more questions before we get out of here. Let's see what we got here. Anything good? Kentucky fans better get used to the name Andy Kennedy. I don't really know what that means. If that's going to be Kentucky's head coach or Mitch Barnhart, Mitch Barnhart might as well just resign. I mean, and I think, by the way, there's a possibility that Mitch Barnhart does not survive this. By the way, Torres gets a lot of stuff wrong, but I said it when the John Calipari, the thought was that he could be fired. I said, listen, fire John Calipari, but I'm warning you, I don't know if Mitch Barnhart is the guy that you want to make the hire to replace John Calipari. And so I sat there and I said, I don't know if that's what you want. And I think a lot of Kentucky fans agreed with me. And I think now they're starting to realize and they're starting to get scared as to what the possibility could be of life with Mitch Barnhart calling the shots. What do we got for more questions here? I don't get that question. They got to get used to Andy Kennedy. Super sticker from Power Hour NFL. Thank you. Power Hour NFL. We'll be relying on you next week because my NFL draft prep has not been very good this year because I didn't think we were going to go through the most insane coaching search maybe in the history of college basketball. By the way, I was thinking about this. Shout out to Andy Enfield. My guy, Andy Enfield from USC. If he doesn't take the SMU job, Eric Musselman doesn't get USC, John Calipari doesn't get Arkansas, we're not in this situation. I don't even know what we'd be talking about right now. It's like, what are we doing? John Calipari at Arkansas, I still can't believe it. Well, what is the other school? Kentucky doesn't have a head coach. It is insane. Thank you for your support, Power Hour NFL. Obviously, by the way, anybody who wants to drop a super chat, it's appreciated. Those questions will go to the forefront. What other questions we got, producer Matt? Jacob asked, there's rumors going around Twitter that UConn is getting a transfer visit this weekend. Have you heard the same? I have not. But I know that Dan Hurley and his staff, even though Dan Hurley was saying that he's not a big, portal guy and he doesn't want to deal with it, he knows what needs to be done. And I think now that it's full speed ahead, they're going to get some guys. And obviously, look, on this channel, we're going to cover all of it. I don't know of anybody, but I believe they definitely need bodies. I'll be very curious to see who they're pursuing. A couple names that I know that they've at least reached out to. I think Cliff Omayori was one. There's a few others. The portal stuff, like somehow has sort of taken a back seat over the last couple weeks, which is crazy, but that's what happens when John Calipari leaves to go to Arkansas. Josh Bright, I have the Aaron Torres book from Cal's first year. Josh Bright, thank you for your support. For people who are new to this channel, I used to be a big J. I used to write books. I wrote a book on John Calipari's first year. It's called One in Fun. I interviewed everybody. Calipari, DeMarcus Cousins, or no, DeMarcus Cousins was the only one I didn't get. John Wall, Eric Bledsoe, Patrick Patterson, Josh Harrelson. I interviewed probably 60, 70 people. Dwayne Peavy, who's now the AD at DePaul. He was John Calipari's right-hand man. If you're looking for the good times, Kentucky fans, check it out. One in Fun. The book is available on Amazon. I appreciate your support. Let's keep it going. I'm just going to get a little water here while we talk. Casey says, there was a tweet which mentioned Billy D gets his old assistant from Florida to UK to start recruiting. What I'll say as I get some water here is, listen, one thing I'll say, I give all these coaches, the thing that I've learned is that all these coaches, the great ones, there is a plan behind the plan, behind the plan, behind the plan. And what I mean by that is that these coaches don't go in blind. If Billy Donovan is going to take that job, he is not going to start thinking about being the Kentucky basketball coach the day he accepts the job. He'll be working behind the scenes to set up assistants. He'll be working behind the scenes with those assistants to figure out recruits. And so to answer your question, Casey, I don't, who that old assistant coach is, I don't know. I know obviously Matt McCall was his assistant. There's a few others. Speaking of which, I know somebody who worked for Billy Donovan. I might have to shoot him a text to see if he thinks he's coming back. But I'll say this, Casey, it's a great question. And I'll say this, it would not be a thing. It would not be Billy Donovan today or the day he gets the job trying to figure out who his next head coach is. Let's keep the questions coming. Man. Why not Kelvin Sampson from Houston? The only reason it's not going to be Kelvin Sampson from Houston, there's two reasons why. Kelvin Sampson is 60. He'll be 69. He's 68 years old right now. He'll be 69 in October. So that's one. I mean, he's got 2-3 years left. That's probably part of it. The other thing is, I could be mistaken on this. I'm pretty sure that he's got his son set up to be the next head coach. I don't know if it's official, but I'm pretty sure it's unofficially official that his son is the coach in waiting at Houston. Obviously, he's not getting that at Kentucky. So I think Kelvin Sampson's retiring at Houston. Houston fans enjoy it, appreciate it. Coaches like Kelvin Sampson don't come along very often. I can't see him leaving for Kentucky at 68 years old, going on 69. Jimmy James, if all else fails, call Pitino. I'll have to get some details on Pitino's contract. I think he's riding it out in New York City. I think that's where he wants to be. It's funny. I mentioned this, but by the way, I'll say this. I saw some really bad takes on this Kentucky job over the last 24 hours, and I don't want to criticize anybody. I saw somebody say, could you give Rick Pitino a 1-year contract to get things right at Kentucky? People all understand Rick Pitino has a job, right? Everybody understands people don't leave good jobs where they're set up for the rest of their careers to take a job for 1 year. That does not happen. So that was a weird one. But anyway, I think Rick Pitino, listen, I don't think Rick Pitino would take it at this point. But I mean, you got to make the call, right? Great question from the posse here. He says, is Mark Few totally against leaving Gonzaga? It's a great question. I don't think he's totally against leaving Gonzaga, but I don't think at this point he is probably going to. I think if this job had opened 3, 4, 5 years ago, maybe he would have been more open to it. But he's now 61 years old, excuse me. His son's on the team. I do wonder, it's another one. Does he have one more great rebuild in him? But listen, people talk about it and I believe it. His quality of life is so good. The man loves to fish. I don't think he wants to recruit. I don't think he wants to deal with a lot of the chaos that comes at the high major level. That's not a Kentucky thing. That's a Carolina thing, a Duke thing, or whatever. He lives on a river. He's out there fishing every day. And I think he's got that good work-life balance at Gonzaga. And here's the other thing about Gonzaga, which is interesting, is that they should have a top 5. Gonzaga returns everybody except for Anton Watson off their team last year. I have them in the top 5 of my way too early top 25. And so I think they're going to be really good. And I think because of it, I think it's hard to convince him to get him out of that contract. By the way, how many Arkansas fans we got in this puppy? Arkansas fans, we sold a crap ton of these. Arkansas fans, it's time. Make sure to check them out. Big Pig Invasion. We appreciate your support. Check them out. So somebody suggests Indiana Sports Connection. Great follower of this page. Appreciate your support, Indiana Sports Connection. Somebody suggested Matt Painter to UK. Ooh, buddy. You talk about a guy that I just don't think is built for Kentucky. It's Matt Painter. I mean, listen, the guy lost to a 13 seed, a 15 seed, and a 16 seed in 3 straight NCAA tournaments, okay? Calipari lost to the same St. Peter's team and took 1,000% more arrows than Matt Painter did. I think Matt Painter is a really good coach. I think he's kind of built for Purdue. Like, being around all those Purdue fans, I don't know how to put it nicely. They're a different group of people. They really are. And I think it fits him. He's kind of low key. The fans love him. The expectations are high, but not unreasonable. I mean, listen, if you make the Dan Hurley offer, I mean, he'd probably have to listen, and I don't think he'd be bad. So like, let the record show. But here's the thing about Kentucky. Are you going to be willing to sit there and let him redshirt guys and not recruit McDonald's All-Americans and develop guys and take 3-year guys and not go after the huge names in the portal? I think part of Kentucky is John Calipari. We can debate it, argue it, fight it. But John Calipari has created a culture where Kentucky fans love not created a culture, but where you're expected to recruit the elite of the elite. And I don't think you can go back to we're recruiting all 4-year guys and developing them. Now, I'll give Matt Painter credit. He's got a profile type that he likes. He clearly gets guys who buy into the system. I think that's a tough sell for me with Matt Painter as the head coach. Maybe 1 or 2 more if there's a couple good ones. Indiana Sports Connection says, this guy Aaron Torres, he's getting it done. Listen, I'm not going to lie. I had to drag myself off the mat today. It was I was not expecting to do a live show, but there's just so much going on with this Kentucky job that it's like, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Not talk about it? You know, listen, what does John Rothstein say? We sleep in May. I'm going to be sleeping in June. In June, when we got nothing, I'm going to be, what's the old LeBron meme where he's holding his hand and he says, I prayed for days like this. Listen, I prayed for weeks like this because everything we're talking about is going crazy viral. We've had, I mean, literally, I'm not kidding. We've had hundreds of thousands of views just over the last week or so. We've set record numbers, the biggest streams, the biggest videos, the biggest this, the biggest that. It's just insane, the number of people that is tuning into this channel right now. So, I mean, what am I going to do? Not create content with the biggest story in college basketball, the biggest possible coaching search that happened unexpectedly? I mean, what am I going to do? Sit on the sidelines? You know, listen, John Rothstein said we sleep in May. I'll tell you what, those mimosas, those margaritas, they're going to hit hard. I mean, I'm telling you, from about mid-May when the portal starts slowing down until about probably mid-July when football starts picking back up with media days, you won't be seeing Torres quite as much because I'm going to take full advantage. But right now, listen, this is hot. We're hot right now. You know, you got to ride the wave. Listen, John Calipari just dropped a content bomb from the heavens. I'd be remiss if I didn't take advantage of that. A couple more, we'll get out of here. Super chat. Billy D is the reason this Lexingtonian is a Gator, from Justin Blair. I'll be honest. I love Billy Donovan. He makes them relevant. Listen, like I said, sometimes in life, timing just works out. Urban Meyer quits Florida, and you know this being a Gator, Justin Blair. Urban Meyer quits Florida. He has no idea that Jim Tressel is going to get fired because he covered up tattoos. But then the Ohio State job opens up and he comes back. You know, the Michigan job, everything falls apart right about the time that Jim Harbaugh has run out of gas in San Francisco. Sometimes things just work out. And I think if you're Billy Donovan, I know you don't want to get back into college basketball. But again, you're going to get fired. You're not an NBA coach. It's okay. Not everybody is everything. I'm not a baseball analyst, okay? If ESPN could offer me a huge contract, I'd get fired in a year trying to talk Shohei Ohtani every day. But it's okay. You're not an NBA coach. It's fine. You may be a great college basketball coach, though. You're already a Hall of Famer. Go win a third title at a second different school, that's all-time crap. Then we're talking about you with Rick Pitino. We're talking about you with whoever, the great ones. And I think he can do it, especially in this era. Again, he's got to act quick, though. Justin Blair, great question, great comment, and I agree. I just think everything's working out. If Calipari, and I've said it 30 times on this stream, so I apologize. If Calipari leaves in early March, you can't pursue Billy Donovan. But now I think if you think you can get him, you wait him out. But again, you got to know that you can get him. Let's keep it going. A couple more. UK needs a younger coach, not any of these older coaches like Duke with John Shire. I disagree. I think Duke fans are a little worried about John Shire. I don't think they should be, but John Shire, it's great that he's young, but prove something to me. I'd rather have a Chris Beard in his 50s. Obviously, Dan Hurley's not on the table. I don't need a guy that's 38 years old. Like, go hire a 48 years old that's been through the war. By the way, Sean Miller is a name we haven't mentioned. Sean Miller, I think, would be great at Kentucky. He's coached in that fishbowl type job at Arizona. He knows what it's like, but he's still got a chip on his shoulder because of the way things ended at Arizona. I disagree. I think Shire, listen, Coach K was going to pick who he wanted, and that's who he clearly wanted. I don't know. I disagree that you need a young coach. If there's a great young coach, if Billy Donovan, if Todd Golden had made a Final Four this year and he's available and he's 36, go get him. But I'm just saying, I don't think you need a young head coach. I think 40, 41, 45 is probably ideal, early 50s, etc. What a night, man. What a week. Iowa State head coach Miguel Hernandez says TJ Otzelberger, he's another one with a huge buyout, like $18, $19 million. But they were willing to pay for it for Nate Oates. Really talented head coach, has led Iowa to 2 Sweet 16s in the last 3 years. He's another one. He's got a great team coming back. And the thing I'll say about that guy, Kentucky fans will love this, is that he's a guy that knows how to build rosters. This is not a year-to-year thing for him. And he develops and he coaches and he keeps guys in the program. And I know Kentucky fans are tired of the turnover after turnover after turnover after turnover. Well, that's the guy that's going to help you with that. Let's get Mark Stoops to coach basketball. Well, it is a football school now. Listen, that's why John Calipari's at Arkansas. You read that Kyle Tucker report when Mitch Barnhart, when Mitch Barnhart didn't have his back, that was essentially why John Calipari felt like he could never trust Mitch Barnhart again. It's because Mitch Barnhart didn't have his back during that Mark Stoops fiasco. So I really have nothing else to add. Listen, you want to go 500 with the most boring offense ever? Mark Stoops is definitely your guy. Oh, sorry. Too soon. For producer, is it true UConn is looking for an AC and that Tom Moore is going to full-time GM? Great question, Jacob. I did talk to Tom Moore for like 40 minutes, like 10 minutes after the national championship game. And he's the best of the best. Best of the best, salt of the earth. For people who don't know, longtime Jim Calhoun assistant, then the head coach at Quinnipiac, now a longtime Dan Hurley assistant. I've heard for a year that is the eventual goal, is for him to be in an off the court role where he doesn't have to recruit. He doesn't have to be on the road. He said he's been in it in coaching for 37 or 38 years. So you do the math, probably about 60 years old. I think that's probably where he ends up. I don't know if it's going to be this offseason, whatever. By the way, from the UConn perspective, I think this is important. There was some stuff done at the Final Four. Kamani Young, Luke Murray, two very talented assistant coaches, both said the plan is for them to be back. I give Dan Hurley credit. He has put those guys in a position where they make so much money that I don't think that they can leave for just any head coaching job. And so they're staying in Connecticut, and they're building something really special. See if there's one or two more, then we'll get out of here. What about the Rutgers head coach? He has an elite class coming in. Steve Peichel, UConn alum. If Kentucky hires the Rutgers head coach, I think he's got one NCAA tournament win. I know it's Rutgers. Mitch Barnhart might as well just name himself the head coach. At that point, it's not a dumb comment. I don't want to make it sound that way, but if that's how far you got to go. But by the way, I'll say this. I don't think Mark Pope is turning down the job if he's offered it. And so if he's offered it, he's going to say yes. So it's just a question of, I don't think you get beyond Mark Pope. Then again, I didn't think you were going to get beyond Scott Drew, but you're definitely not going to get beyond Mark Pope. The question is, are you going to wait for Billy Donovan? Are you going to call Bruce Pearl? Are you going to call Chris Beard? I think the bottom is Mark Pope. I don't think you really worry after that. Tell you what, I think it's time for me to get out of here, man. We just did an hour 10 here on a Thursday. Appreciate everybody's support. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, oh, baby, make sure to do so. We are closing in. We just crossed 36,000 subscribers. Earlier this week, we crossed 35,000 subscribers. And here's the thing. We ain't slowing down anytime soon. Calipari's going to get recruits at Arkansas. Somebody at some point is going to get the Kentucky job. Somebody at some point is going to have to start recruiting for Kentucky. And Kentucky's going to get players too. And so you're going to want to subscribe to this channel. By the way, UConn is going to be very active in the portal, as Jacob has referenced a few times. And so basically, bottom line is, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Make sure you're also subscribed to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure that you are subscribed. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media. You can see it on the scroller. Aaron_Torres on Twitter. Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram. Producer Matt's been cutting up some really good reels from the show that have gone super viral. We appreciate him. And also, Torres is going to be more active on TikTok. I swear, that's like my New Year's resolution, is to get going on TikTok here. So if you're not subscribed there, make sure to do so as well. Appreciate everybody's support. The plan is to be back Monday, Sunday night into Monday. If this week has taught me anything, I don't know. I could be back tomorrow. I could be back Saturday. We'll be back whenever Kentucky has a coach for sure. If it's before Sunday, if it's not, guess what? We're going live on Sunday night. UConn's got their national championship parade this week. I'm sure something will come out of that. So appreciate everybody's support. We will be back no later than Sunday night, although I assume we might be back before then. Appreciate everybody. Have a great night. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. JJ Reddick, you F-head, unblock me. See y'all soon, no later.